I know people will trickle in, but I think we can just kind of jump into it and get started and just, I think it's just important to discuss this topic for tonight, which is men's health, and talk about, how we can, I guess, break down the stigma that men face when being open and speaking up about their health. And just, I'm excited to have Emmitt, Cedric, and Rick join us as fellow patient leaders, as well as Grady, who is my colleague, as well as another fellow patient leader, join us in this discussion. Before we get started, I'm going to just do a quick introduction of myself, pass it on over to Grady, and then I'll introduce our other panelists. So for those that don't know me, my name is Seth Rotberg. I am not only a member of the We Go Health Patient Leader Network team, but I'm a fellow patient advocate in the rare disease space, impacted by a rare disease called Huntington's disease. And so knowing this topic and how important it is to kind of speak up and be yourself and not feel like you have to hold your feelings inside because it's a sign of weakness is something I've learned personally, and I want to help spread the word to others. So I'm excited to be here and just kind of get the conversation started. So Grady, what about you? Do you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. As Seth mentioned, I joined the WEO Health Patient Leader team in February, and I'm super excited to be here. I'm also a patient advocate myself. I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis 5 years ago and started advocating from there. And this topic is especially important to me too, because I was diagnosed at the beginning of college and it was extremely difficult to find support, especially as a young adult male who didn't know anyone. And so a lot of my journey has been shaped by trying to be the resource that I wish I had and could not find at that point. So I think this topic will be super insightful, and I hope that it will inspire many other young males or males of any age to speak up about health topics.
Thank you, Grady. And I will briefly share a little bit about our speakers for today. They're all amazing advocates and they're doing a lot of great work. And so the brief description I'm going to share is just a snippet of what they do. So we'll first start with Rick. So Rick J. Nash is a volunteer advocate and speaker who's been a leader in the hepatitis C patient community for a few years now. He currently writes for hepmag.com, formerly moderated and written for hepatitisc.net, which is part of Health Union. Am I right, Rick, in that? Awesome. And, he's been heavily involved as a volunteer with many different volunteer experiences, being a board member of a variety of different nonprofits and chapters. His mom is a survivor of Hep C of 3 treatments, while he's also a hepatitis C survivor of six treatments, a liver transplant recipient, and a rare vertical transmission. And so he hopes that his story inspires more men to talk about their health, especially with hepatitis C. He is a recent graduate of his master's in public health program in global health at CSUSM. And he's currently the director of education and outreach at Open Biopharma Research and Training Institute. Next up is Emmitt Henderson III, who is a 26-year male lupus warrior whose story started in 1980 with discoid lupus that evolved to lupus nephritis and systemic lupus. He has been dealing with lupus for a very long time, but that hasn't stopped him from becoming a full-time advocate for this disease and really helping share his story and the story of others who are impacted by lupus. He actually created his own organization called Male Lupus Warriors LLC in hopes of inspiring anyone with any disease that you can overcome the worst. He wanted to raise awareness in the community that men get lupus too, and wanted to give men that safe space to talk about their illness and how to strengthen their mental health. He's currently building a nonprofit from Male Lupus Warriors. And last but not least is Cedric Pulliam. Hope I got that right, Cedric? Yes, sweet. So Cedric currently serves as Senior Public Health Advisor and Project Officer for the CDC in the Prevention Program branch of the Division of HIV/AIDS Prevention. He is a board certified health psychologist. In 2019, he completed his postdoctoral fellowship as a senior health equity fellow at the Black AIDS Institute in LA, as a member of the Youth Health Equity Model Practice Health Equity Fellowship Program by the Office of Minority Health of the US. That is a lot. That is doing a lot of great work. And Cedric is also co-founded the Ending the Criminalization of HIV and Over Incarceration in Virginia Coalition. Previously volunteered at the Gay Men's Health Collaborative for many years. And you can, I was going to say, there's so much more that Cedric is doing in the community. So definitely check him out. Check all of them out on social media. They're all on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, you name it, they're on it. And so without further ado, guys, let's kind of get this party started. And I'm going to throw you the first question of the night, which is, why did you start opening up and talking about your health? I'm going to throw it over to Emmitt.
Oh, hey everybody, thanks for joining. What got me started in this was when I first decided to come out and tell my story is because I did not see any type of resource of men with lupus. There's only 10%, building a little bit higher than that, but of men that are diagnosed with this disease, the 80 plus 90% are women. So me going on to the forums, trying to get information and resources in regards to what I am going through as a male, we're just not even there. So I decided to go ahead and let me just create my own to see if I can attract guys to come to me, to where my 25 years of experience at the time can pretty much give an insight what it was. When I told my story, I didn't know I had one till I told it. Once I told it, then it was one of those things where people were reaching out to me, and now I could see my organization and my advocacy coming together. But at first it was a little slim and a kind of, a little deterrent, only because men were not opening up. That 90% of women, I was able to get their attention with the advocacy I was doing, but it was still kind of shy for the men to do it. But let's fast forward now to today. I now have a good forum of men that are reaching out to me. Me and a partner, we created a male lupus dream team where we have an all Zoom meeting for men with lupus only. And to our surprise, we got guys to open up. They were able to talk about what they were thinking, but never was able to say on a platform. So it's a big thing for me to bring that out, to get guys to step past that barrier and to have the courage to step up and tell their story in hopes of uplifting the next guy.
Thank you, Emmitt. Appreciate it. And, you're doing a great job just sharing your story, and especially knowing that, of people who have lupus, about 10% are men, but yet, you're hoping that more men can come out and share their story like yourself. And so thank you for sharing a little bit.
Absolutely.
Cedric.
Good evening, and thank you all for joining. I think one of the main pieces for me opening up and talking about my health is I had been dismissed and ignored so much from providers. My close family, my parents, and some of my other close family members knew that I would always have issues with my stomach, or issues with, just not being able to eat certain things because my stomach will react, but it was always dismissed by providers for over a decade. And so for me, opening up about my health is that there has to be others that witness and experience what I experienced. Being shunned out the door, said nothing's wrong with you, change your diet. And then finally, after a decade of repeated issues throughout college, grad school, living overseas, a lot of global travel, and just imagining actually having Crohn's disease for that long and not having any treatment was deteriorating my insides in my body. And so that made me want to open up and talk about it. And one of the other pieces that really had been hard for me to find was not only just patient advocates or, patient leaders within the Crohn space, but those that identify and look like me. So leaders and advocates of color, but also those that identify within the LGBTQ spectrum. And that, for one, was something that was very invisible, in my opinion, and just very, very difficult to find. And so I said, if I don't act and step up on my own, who will be that voice? Thank you.
Like, should I clap now? Awesome. Thank you, Cedric. And you're absolutely right? It's like that fight or flight mentality sometimes where you're like, well, if I don't do it, if I walk away, who's going to stand up? Who's going to step up to the plate? Rick, what about you?
You know, I'm a little weird on this, because, you know, I was diagnosed at age 12. And so I started talking about my health immediately, which was actually more problematic than necessarily beneficial at the time, because a 12-year-old just opening up about the fact that they have Hep C really isn't helpful to people. Didn't really get a lot of good feedback there. And so, you know, a lot of internalization, a lot of problems that kind of happened a lot of because of that. But, you know, I realized later on, you know, well, because Hep C has its own stigma that's unrelated. But when I was in my 20s, and my disease started getting a lot worse, and became to the point where I had no real hope. I really couldn't do much. You know, I was in a dark place in 2013, and something really big happened. There was a treatment that happened for Hep C. And so that changed the entire outlook of how I acted as an advocate, as everything, because to me, I saw suddenly going, okay, my experience can mean something, because I had started blogging in 2011, just with my treatment, trying to help people. It was really about trying to keep my family informed about what I was doing. But then I noticed some other people with hepatitis C started following me and going, well, what's going on? What's happening with this? Because there weren't a lot of personal blogs about that. So I just started kind of chatting about it with my family and with some friends, and then it kind of started to grow from there. And then that's why I have my pseudonym, which is Rick J. Nash, just because I had to hide my name, because again, there's the different associated stigma with hepatitis C. And so, but as my advocacy grew, and more importantly, as in 2013, because there became a cure, everything changed the whole ballpark. People were talking about it more. I could talk about it in a way that people weren't condemning it. It became a lot more of a way to be able to talk to it, because there was a reason to have hope. There was something to move towards. And so, you know, in 2013, 2014 is when I really started writing for HepMag, and started doing a lot more advocacy, started working with my local American Liver Foundation, raising money with their teams, and, you know, working there. And every single time I tried to use the opportunity to talk about what was going on in my health, what was going on in my situation, because the challenge was that when I was looking for material, there was a lot of really helpful material by a bunch of doctors, and it was great. But if you're a patient, that doesn't help you. And so as a guy looking for health stuff out there, you know, I was very blessed to find Alan Franciscus' HCV Advocate, which no longer exists, unfortunately, but it was a great tool at the time. And it really helped me get started with hepatitis C and become my own advocate myself, become very educated about what it was. But really talking about my experience was the one thing that I felt was taking the context of my experience and using it to teach these very small components of, like, this is a symptom, this is a situation, this is a circumstance you look for. And story as that analog, I think not only helped a lot of, you know, people to kind of see the journey. 'Cause I felt like if I'm walking through this, you know, if I'm going to blaze a trail, I may as well leave a trail behind me. I may as well leave something for other people to walk through. And I think we all kind of share that, you know, that need, you know, that we saw the gap, and we needed to seize it, because we saw we felt this pain, we felt this terrible experience, and we know that we don't want anyone else to feel that way, you know. This was, you know, we just saw it as an opportunity to really start being, you know, being more for other people.
Yeah, I definitely love hearing all these reasonings. It's definitely super inspiring on a personal level too, because I think for me, I think all of us know how isolating it is to live with any kind of chronic condition. And until people start opening up like all of you have, it's hard for people to feel seen. So I'm really loving hearing about all the diversity of motivation and stories here. It's really, really inspiring. So leading into the second question, what do you guys think we can do as a society to break down the stigma men often face when discussing their health? I'll start with Emmitt again.
Well, since 10% of us guys have been so far in the dugout when it comes to advocating and everything, and it's exactly what me and my partner is trying to do. We are trying to have more involvement in men in events in Zooms and meetings and things, to where the more that we talk about it, and with technology now, it just doesn't have to be over the phone. It could be just like this, where we got a panel full of guys. And again, we have a safe place, non-judgmental place. We have a place where you can talk that is not going to leave the area. And you are talking to guys walking in the same shoes as you. So yes, we do understand. The more that we have these type of events that's out here, the more that the guys are more willing to get involved. I'm also involved with the Rare Men's Disease Mental Health that is held with around the world. And there was one point that there was an option to let everybody in. All of the guys were like, one woman get in, I'm done. I'm not going to do it anymore. So that's how important it is for men to have this to come together, because we do have that stigma where we never feel like we're vulnerable, but yet we are. We just don't want to show it to the public or society or our people around us. But yet, when you're talking to other guys that have that mentality of, I am vulnerable, but I don't want to show it off, and we're all talking together, we can become one and be strong together. And then therefore, now let's go outside of our circle and let's talk some more. So again, just get more men involved. All the women that advocate for your guys' groups, acknowledge the men that are in it, because they are there and they may be there, maybe not participating in anything at all, but they're finding their way to break the ice. And for them to get involved, that's where they want to start. So just get them involved, us involved.
I gotta echo what Kristen in the chat said, actually, and just say that your passion is infectious. Honestly, I'm ready to go start something. And I think you're totally right. It is all about like opening up these avenues for people, because when you start opening them up, it's just more accessible for all of us in the long run. So I really love hearing that. Definitely agree on that. I'll pass it over to Cedric.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grady. I think, Emmitt hit it on the nail. An additional component that I think can really break the stigma up is these intergenerational, like gender role, like components and mantras that we live and exist in, that, boys can't be emotional, or boys shouldn't be emotional. Boys shouldn't show when things are hurting them or harming them or they're feeling bad. It's like those intergenerational things that we're starting to see parents in today's society really start debating and having debacles regarding those issues. And that's where it starts. It's your upbringing and, your environment, your house, your home, your parents, your family, church, school. All of those aspects are really where we need to be working at. The core of it is there. The root of it's there. Especially as we're younger, in that like elementary, middle school, and even high school ages. That's where this stigma really grows. And then after that, it's a monster. So it's even harder to, change the hearts and minds of people when it comes to adults, especially as they age over time. And so you have to really hit it at the core there. And I think also our language and how we choose to describe or depict chronic illnesses, and even some of the terms that we have in our own field with like infectious, or like all this kind of, it's all derogatory or negative, or it sounds that way. And so when things sound or feel negative, they come off and they make everything around it negative. And so it's stigmatizing, and we have to figure out, as practitioners and those working in the health field, how do we also utilize our language to better destigmatize these matters? That's one of the things I think is really critical there, especially as us advocates and leaders. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up that point. I think that's super important one, because I could tell even through you talking through it, it's interesting really, because the stigma itself, even just talking about stigma and the fact that there is a stigma around men's health is difficult to talk about. And I think it really is because of leaders like you all that we're starting to see that start to shift a little bit. So I'm really hoping that that'll continue to happen down the line. So really great point. I'll swing it over to Rick.
Thank you. And, just to continue to expand on Cedric's point about the upbringing, I used to work with kids before this, before my switch to working in biopharma. And when I did that, I I felt it was essential to really have those kinds of conversations about vulnerability at an early age. Because I was working with elementary school and middle school kids, and so that's really that formative time when you're seeing those patterns develop, and they usually will latch on to male figures in their lives to really see and cement those and mirror those. And so I took the role modeling and modeling very, very essentially, and found that that was a really critical component into really making that real. And so for me, I'd always seen this as like the most powerful thing you could do as a man is taking a weakness and turning it into a strength. And so converting these things, taking something that is challenging for you and turning it into something greater. And so, we had a lot of, for some unusual reason, our school had a lot of children with developmental disabilities as well. And so it gave a very unique opportunity to really have that discussion at an early age and to talk about, what we see as health and what we see as these different things. And I felt that a lot of those kids really learned a lot more because of that. And I wish that we could have these types of conversations and these types of things a little bit more openly at a younger age. But I think that just as we think about the stigma now, if we were to talk about having these types of open conversations about health at a younger age, I think you'd still have some stigma around that too. Because around younger ages, people are very sensitive about what health topics you may engage with children. And it is very challenging trying to engage that in a soft touch way. But it's all about that vulnerability. It's all about talking about it. It's all about that safe space. If you have those things in there, you have the key components to get it started. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. At the end of the day, we can put the pieces together and we can try to get as many folks as involved, but it's all the steps in the system. So that's how I think it is.
Yeah, I know you all brought up a lot of great points, and just going from Emmitt, who's firing up me and Grady and others, to, Cedric, who's talking about, how the stigma grows in those early school years, and it's tougher, when you get older, to kind of change those perceptions. To Rick, what you just mentioned about kind of the idea of role modeling, right? And trying to discuss it at an early age to show that it's okay to share feelings. I mean, I was very fortunate growing up that my dad was one of my role models, and, he was a little hesitant to share his own feelings, but he did show that side. And I think that helped me to be like, okay, it's okay to open up. But I think also learning from others and connecting with others who get it, right? I mean, the work that you all are doing in the community, I'm sure you all are in some sense a role model to others who are like, oh, they're sharing their story, I want to now share my story. So I think it's so important. And like you all said, like, the earlier we can do it and raise awareness, the more likely it is to really hit home and make a difference, to say, hey, it's not a weakness. This is actually part of who you are, and it's okay. And don't feel like you are going to be shamed for sharing your feelings, or if you're having a bad day, like, be open and honest. And those people who are there for you, no matter what, are going to understand that and respect that. So, kudos to all of you for making a difference. And so this next question is more for your perspectives on, the caregivers or loved ones. So, like, what can caregivers or loved ones do to better support men on their health journey? I'm gonna switch the order around a little bit and go over to Cedric first.
Yes. I think this one is a very interesting one because, I come from a Southern family, North Carolina, the Piedmont Triad region. And even though I wasn't necessarily raised there, that's the core of my family, right? And so Southern cooking, a lot of fried food, a lot of good food, right? But on my father's side, one of the things was our stomachs. We eat something and our stomachs are going to have issues. That was the norm, right? On my father's side. And it's a growing joke with us a lot of times because we can't eat something and be able to be good. And so growing up with that, when I started having major complications in college, I had no clue something was wrong with me, but I was devastated. And so one of the things I didn't know how to really, outside of the joking and things, I didn't know how to express that with my loved ones, right? It wasn't that they were dismissive of me or anything like that. It's just like, I actually was like at a block, like 18-year-old me didn't know how to really address that with, like, my grandma and my aunts and stuff that while I was in college, they lived really close locally. And so it was a real big roadblock. And I think it's not necessarily me, saying that it was something that they did wrong or what they should have done better. I think it was more so like, how does loved ones interact with their other loved ones to understand and connect with them on those levels, to be able to discuss these health concerns. That's one of the things I think are very interesting, because now, genealogy testing and the DNA stuff and the genetic testing to understand health issues, these topics and the conversations have grown way more than what we see back in the day, because as a Black Southern family back in the day, you don't really talk about your issues when it comes to health, and it's something in the tradition of the family that you don't learn really much about anyone's ailments or issues or health issues or concerns till after they pass away or die. And that's the sad part of the truth. So I think it's really like changing the wheels and reinventing the wheels there, with being able to talk and understand and connect with your family. I never had a specific caregiver in mind because I was grown and I don't have a significant partner. But for me, the loved ones, the family, that right there was interesting. And also friends, because in college, how do I express that to my friends, right? So it wasn't really something we talked about. Like, they didn't probably know I had an issue at all. And so it's in those growing young adult years that I was just like, this is not their concern, it's my concern. So I think all together is more just like a learning and growing process is what I'm really getting at on both ends, whether it's a family member or a friend. Thank you.
Thanks, Cedric. Appreciate you sharing all that and I think it somewhat goes back to your point of like how you're brought up, right, in some sense, and your lifestyle. But it sounds like eventually you broke out of it and you were able to now be more open with your story and having sometimes those tough conversations, but those much needed ones. So thank you for sharing. Rick, what about you?
I guess I struggle with this one, if only because I look back to my own health journey, and I look back to myself and my mother, because we both had hepatitis C, and because of a vertical transmission, so it's mother to child. And so I look back to my dad being the caregiver, and he struggled a lot with that, because obviously when someone you love is diagnosed with something, you're dealing with your own grief as well. And so when the caregiver is someone that's especially when there's the onus on the man, especially if he is the head of household or if he is in that situation at that time, that can be tricky, as a caregiver trying to step into that role, because suddenly that's a lot to step into. So I think the first thing is really space. To be honest, giving them the space and time that they need to really be able to process what that is, and being able to give them an opportunity to really process each of those components, because it's a journey, right? We start with our diagnosis, we start with the grief that comes from that, we then move from the diagnosis and we move to the next phase, which may not necessarily be a linear phase. These things change, and for every condition is unique. And so I think that when we consider that men's health on their journey, I think that it's just a matter of, giving them the space, giving them the opportunity to let them kind of talk, but at the same time, still kind of poking them, because I feel like as men, we need a little bit of pressure. Sometimes I don't mean to stereotype or anything, but we tend to need a little bit of poking, a little bit of prodding, a little bit of momming, I guess. And so it can be helpful in that way, I think, to have just a little bit of that, but not too much, just to have that space. And so I think that's really one of the critical things, as a caregiver or loved one, to better support men on that journey, is to give them, to find whatever that is, whatever that space is, and just kind of help them there.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it. Emmitt.
Well, I'm gonna tell you guys right now, if you're not in my immediate family, you never knew what was wrong with me, because in '95, I was told I had a woman's disease. So here I am at 25 years old. Now you can do the math, you'll figure out my age. I own my own property. I was a manager of a dealership as the youngest employee, one of the youngest employees there in management. I was raising 2 kids already, so I was doing everything that a grown man was supposed to do at that young age. Now you tell me I have a woman's disease. I'm in denial, first of all. And my whole family was able to know what was going on because of my time spent in the hospital just for the diagnosis. Fast forward, getting out of the hospital, trying to go back to work and everything. People saw my episodes of going in and out of the hospital. But again, the man in me said, I'm not going to tell people what's wrong. At the same time, I was so uneducated on lupus that I did not know how to share it the proper way. And plus, because of it being kind of a rare disease at the time for men, it's something that they wouldn't understand anyway. So I tried to move on and march on, just going through life without this. It took me 3 years to try to attend the first support group. It took me 2 years to tell somebody outside of my family what was going on with me. Now, one of the biggest reasons for that is because of everything that I had got myself to that point. I felt like I cannot show vulnerability. I'm a man. I'm raising 2 kids, my own place. I'm not going to show somebody that I'm weak or something is bothering me, that I can't work, or I'm going to stay in the house and sleep all day. I don't want to be and have the perception of myself being lazy. So I pushed through it and pushed through it. I realized that people looked at me as being strong for everything that I was doing by controlling this disease, still maintaining work, still having and everything up to par. But then I realized that when I did tell the few people about what was going on with me, they looked at me as even being stronger. So now here I am fooling myself thinking I need to hide this from the world or from my family, from my friends, because they're not going to understand I got an illness. But then people were more showing me empathy because now they know that if Emmitt does have a setback, it's not because he's lazy. It's not because he can't do it. It's because he's fighting an illness every single day. Once the education come out on lupus that I was able to speak on, people start to get it. Now I'm starting to feel a little bit better to where everything that I preach and talk about today is because I learned from my experience in the past. When it comes to people letting them know about my condition, if it's brought up and asked, I have no problem sharing that I'm a male lupus warrior. And yes, I've gone through 26 years of two transplants, 2 joint replacements, radiation, chemo, all kind of ailments of failed organs. And here I am standing today. So that does make me a strong person as opposed to me thinking that I wouldn't be looked at as being strong. So it's very important for me to just try to let people understand because education is key. The person that you talk to about what your illness is and what you're going through, if they don't know anything about it, they're not going to understand. You can't expect them to understand at the same time. So I do not look at putting too much energy into having to explain myself. But when I get the chance to sit down with you, by the time I'm done with you, you'll understand. And then we can talk.
Yeah, really great response. I mean, I can definitely relate to a lot of what you and everyone else said because I was the same way in my own journey with taking my time to having to be comfortable opening up. And I think that's something that is really interesting because it's been central to so much of what everyone here has said is that we're also influenced by vulnerability and having to combat these outside opinions that we deal with from the public, from media and things like that. So that's really interesting. And I know it's something that now as a caregiver, that caregiver patient dynamic is such a challenge to deal with on its own. And it's a whole other topic. So when you're going with a chronic illness, there's definitely a lot to manage for sure. Thinking about the other side of things on the next question, what advice do you have for male patients or caregivers who might be hesitant to open up about their health experiences? And I'll copy Seth and mix up the order again, just to keep things really interesting here and throw it to Rick.
Thank you. With this one, it's a matter of that time too, because the thing is like, if someone's not ready to open up about their experience, you don't want to push them. Everyone has the right time to when they're comfortable talking about it. And, I've always, ever since I heard this, I thought this was just perfect for it. When you have an injury, when you have a cut, you don't talk about an open wound, you wait for the scar to heal. Because when you talk about a scar, you're past it. You're past that point. You have the understanding of hindsight. You can speak with it without opening up that wound again, without making it hurt as much. And the thing about when we talk about our stories, when we relive our story, we're reliving them. And a lot of times when we talk about them, we feel that emotion, we feel all that feelings that we felt before. It may not be as extreme as it was at that time, but it is still very much present. And, it is impossible for us to really separate those things. And when we do, it's weird. It just comes off odd. But the thing is, so when I say that, when when male patients feel that they are able to talk about it in a way, when that scar forms, I think that's when they feel ready for it. So if I were to, when I do come across, because I speak regularly with a lot of folks who DM me, and obviously in hepatitis C, nobody's on the surface on it. There's everyone's, it's all DMs, it's all private, it's all quiet. It's very, because Hep C is spoken in hushed tones. It's a silent epidemic in many ways. And so, in this situation, there's this extra layer of stigma that comes out too. So if somebody comes out, usually they'll come out with like a different name, or maybe they'll say it under some other thing. So we have lots of pseudonyms in our area as well because of that. And so, you take the steps that you feel comfortable with, you find the process that you need to feel comfortable with to talk about your condition, but know that you don't have to be super open. You don't have to tell the world. That's fine. You can just tell your family. You can just tell the people around you. You can tell the people who will be your support network, because the biggest thing, the thing that saved my life, I can talk about all the medical expenses, all the 6 different treatments I was on, everything else, but the thing that saved my life was my support network. And I would not be here today without it. And I'm pretty confident that all of us here have a very similar situation with our support networks. It's just one of those things that just gets you through. And so it is this double-edged, or not double-edged, it's a benefit, is once you're able to open up and talk about it, just like Emmitt said earlier, you have that power. And it's not just you that's more powerful, it's your whole group, because they're able to support you and we're all able to help each other out. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely could not say that any better myself. Honestly, you're making me emotional there, because that just rings so true. I loved what you had to say about it being a process, figuring out your journey, because I think there's this public idea that healing is like this linear thing where you start out being sick or chronically ill, and then all of a sudden you accept it and then you're done. When in reality, as you really accurately described, you have to go through these stages of peaks and valleys and things. So I definitely really love that. And hopefully other people can find solace in that too, because I know I have. I'll throw it over to Emmitt now.
Well, first of all, Grady, what you and Rick said, y'all just answered everything for me. But I'm going to tell you, the way I'm going to say it is that in following and piggybacking off what you guys said, the key word of that is, once the guys start to, feel they're open up, is acceptance. Once we accept what's wrong with us, once we accept that we have an illness to where we're not so perfect like we think we are, we don't have that strength that we think that we can carry out as men on an everyday, every hour basis. We need to accept that. We tend to push our limits so bad because we feel we got something to prove as men that we are going to keep doing it. But then nobody sees behind the curtains where we crash out at night. We crash out for the whole next day. So guys, for me to recommend what I can tell you for younger guys that are, looking to tell their story, they're looking to share your experience, first accept what you're going through. Accept that it is okay to not be okay at times. It is okay to show a little bit of vulnerability, because people are looking at you as being this strong guy. It's kind of like you can get a pass for slowing down just a little bit. They can expect that from you, but then when you tell your story because you've accepted what's going on, people know it. They're going to look at you like, wow, you did all that during your illness. You did all that during your sickness. Now you're going to get patted on the back. They're going to just put you over their shoulders and carry you around places. Now it's going to make you feel stronger inside, because what you just did was inspire somebody. And guess what? You reach one, you teach millions. You are going to inspire somebody else. So accept what you're going through. Be okay with that. Your loved ones will follow right behind you. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, wow. Like, I feel like I'm listening to 3 motivational speakers, because I am right now. I'm like really inspired. And I think it was also super interesting and important what you said about how you do need to accept not being okay. That is such an important step in acceptance. So I really loved you noting that as well. That was awesome. Cedric, I'll pass it over to you.
Wow, it's so hard to follow up from these two. So I think one of the questions in the chat is really how I respond to this question, because I was more so, I hid a lot of what I was going through. I had my own vehicle, so I would go to the doctors myself when I was in college. When things weren't right, or I was, using the bathroom too much and could barely get up and eat or drink water or just hold anything down, I would do everything myself because I didn't want people to know. And I think it was a timeline to get me to a place where I accepted it, which Emmitt just talked about. And then that's when I started opening up to people that I really had close to me as a growing support system, because at the beginning I didn't have that. And for many years I went just very silent, just dealing with myself. And there's going to be folks, especially other male patients out there, that are going to want to deal with it themselves until, as Emmitt already said, until we accept it. And then once I accepted it, I was ready to learn. I was ready to, do what I needed to do, argue and fight back with different providers and things like that. But I just think that it's really important to know that, it may take time. It took me years. I pray that it doesn't take others that long, because I was really hiding a lot from people that cared about me and loved me, that would wanted to help from the very beginning. And so, yeah, that's just my own personal experience. And I just hope that others, embrace those that care and love them, that want to help. And, for caregivers and those that are going to support the patient, I really think, working together and educating each other along that process, if they're open to it, do that. Because once I was able to accept it and learn, my mom was there, really close friends and best friends. They were, I saw this about Crohn's, and, I wanted you to know this or share it with you. And those little tidbits and those actions really meant a lot along my journey. And so just, being alongside and learning and educating yourselves along the way is important. Thank you.
Wow. Like, should we just end it here? Like, just end on, we have one more question, and then we're going to hop into a little bit of Q&A. So let's kind of move on to it. And it's my favorite question, which is, how can we get more men to advocate for their own or their loved ones' health? I know that we've all been there, and we're all like, where are the dudes at, right? And how do we get more of them just to be more open about their story? So let's kind of briefly touch on this question before we move on to some of the questions that we've gotten in the chat. So we'll start with Emmitt.
All right, guys. So I think in order to come out and to, talk about or support basically, whatever situation or advocacy in, is education. You have to know pretty much what's going on with what's ailing you. Therefore, you can speak up on it and speak up about it. If people want to look at you as an advocate and say somehow, some way you can't answer one of the questions that someone may be reaching out for you for support, then it just kind of puts you in a situation. A lot of us learn from our illness from our own experience. I didn't have a clue what it was. In '95, I didn't have Google that I can look up and say, what is lupus? And then the pamphlets and everything I was given had a women's body anatomy for pictures. So it took a while for me to try to even figure out what it was. But in order for people to speak up and speak out on it, you have to be prepared for questions that are going to be asked to you. You can talk about the things you went through, how it related, how you relate from transplants to surgeries to all kinds of things, but you can only speak from yourself. Learn about that and then get involved with groups within your own illness. I still get involved with all kinds of groups because I want to learn what other people are going through, not just what is doing me, because my story is unique in a way, but I want to hear other unique stories so I can talk about more. We can have something to talk about together. The biggest thing I think is just to learning about what you're going through, therefore, so you can explain to other people what is going on with you. It's not like you have to read everything from a book and translate from a book. No, you want to give answers based on your experience, on base what the whole idea is of what is your illness. It's like I'm not knowing too much about hepatitis C. I'm not knowing too much about Crohn's. But in order for me to do that, I have to learn about it or go into groups or hear people personally speaking on it, to learn about it, to me, I think is the best way. So being advocates for your disease and illness, you want to learn more about as much as you can. Therefore, you can kind of relate to everybody. Us as men on this panel now, we can relate. We're men, we're humans. We have pain, we have emotions, we have everything. That our disease can put us in that same category no matter what it is. We may take different medications, we may have different treatments, but overall, it's still for our overall best in our health. So just getting educated on everything, therefore you could speak up on it, is how you want to go about advocating.
I totally agree. Education, the more we educate ourselves, the more we are able to educate others, and the more we can speak up about our stories. So couldn't agree more. Cedric, do you want to go next?
Sure. I think, when we look at trying to get more men to advocate for themselves or, their loved ones' health, I think just being very open and vulnerable, which is very difficult for men, right? It's a very hard thing for men to just be open and vulnerable, right? But I think when I say that, it's not in the sense the literal what we're thinking, open and vulnerable. I think it's more so just being able to and open to discuss health issues, right? What is, when is the next scheduled annual exam for Bob or Uncle Joe or whoever, and having those very open conversations. I'm in a fraternity, and in my fraternity we do look at various health issues, and I remember one of my brothers actually having issues like me. Come to find out he had UC. I didn't know that until 6 years after we had, crossed. So for me, it was one of those things like you just don't realize by, being open and ready to talk and to learn, those conversations really can like develop and, blossom into some really great, support groups or networks or just advocacy about a specific health topic or a health issue. And that, I think, being open and vulnerable as men could really change the narrative of what we see, how we advocate for our own health and for others. Thank you.
Thank you, Cedric. Appreciate it. Rick, all you.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on that, I mean, I've always found that when walking into like a group of men, and when I talk about, because I don't know, I think after 2013, I just don't shut up about hepatitis C. And so when I'm in a group, I don't mean to necessarily, but somehow it'll always kind of go into that. And usually from that, there's usually someone will come up to me afterward, because the thing is, the act of being vulnerable in and of itself usually attracts somebody who says, you know what, I have something, I'm curious about that. Because, when I think of my hepatitis C, I can't help but, realize that, it's like 8 to 10% of folks develop RA symptoms and develop RA. And there's a similarity for me, and Emmitt right there, just because of our similar experiences and going through those components, because RA is a lower on the scale of lupus. And then I look at my GI issues and I can't help but find commonality with Cedric here, when, because as I, have a GI all the time. And so the idea is, everything, every health event, everything has something linking it. And it's just, it's as we are people, we tend to kind of, separate ourselves and put things in boxes and kind of move ourselves apart. And really the vulnerability is breaking those walls down, and I think as more people really start to realize that, oh, that guy's walking around with no walls, like that's possible. I think that's a huge component of it, because I think that just so many men just don't think it's like, that's not a thing we do, that can't be a thing. And because it's so absent from our just daily view, I think that's a component of it. We need to make it more available. And I think through things like this, I think through everything that you guys are doing, we are slowly getting there. And I think that eventually we will. But it's all about the action. Do we take it? Do we seize it? And so we have to seize that moment. We have to walk into those groups. We have to do what we can to chat about it with people. I've before the pandemic, I was doing weekly talks at local retirement places. And, old men would come up to me and be like, well, I had hepatitis C with all this stuff going through this whole story. And I'd be like, they'd tell me this intense story. And it was amazing being able to hear it. And then sometimes they tell me, I never really told anybody about that. My wife doesn't even know. And I'm like, holy, what on earth? How does she not know? How have you not told her? But sometimes, these things are so secretive. So we hold them so much to our identity that we hold them so separately that, we can't open up to anybody but a stranger. Because we don't feel that there's that judgment. Oh, well, they're just a stranger. It's fine. So the benefit here is that, you have that ability. So when you come up as somebody who is repping your condition, your circumstance, your situation, talking to people, having that vulnerability, even with strangers, you open up an opportunity to really help more men talk about and advocate for their health, for their family's health, for everybody. Because, because really men's health, just like anything else, is really about the family's health. It really brings it all back together there. So, I think that's how we really start talking about it. We really just, it's that modeling. It's everything else we've talked about today. It's all those things. We put all those things together in one big, nice little bow. And I think we'll have a lot more men advocating for their own health.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And we got 5 minutes left to now try to tackle a bunch of questions. So we might do a little quick fire round. So, the first kind of question that we received was, do any of you struggle with the need to reinvent yourselves after your health experience? And feel free, anyone can jump in.
Other than the lifestyle change to accommodate our bodies because of health, that part, yeah, but mental health part, no. My mental health kind of stayed the same to where I'm going to beat this no matter what, never changed from the beginning. However, because of lupus and its diet is a lot, exercise a lot. So yes, I had to change, implement more of that, less stress.
Absolutely.
Quick answer.
Yeah. And for me, I reinvented myself every single time because I failed so many treatments, and every time I had to think to myself, is this me? Is it the treatment? What's on here? Because, I would take this treatment that has a 33% chance of success and it would fail. And I'd be like, well, it's me. No, it's not. It's not you. It's the treatment. But psychologically, I'd have that in there. And so I had to reinvent myself every single time, because every time it would fail, I felt like the only thing I could do is rebuild myself anew, try new things, build new things out. And so for me, it was a constant, basically, I was just recycling myself over and over again until I found a better version that I liked.
I can't agree more. I think for me, a lot of since I am a psychologist, I think a lot of times it's more so trying to remove that psychologist mindset when it comes to my healthcare, ask more questions, do more research, log or journal things, not just allowing the GI care team to tell me to change my diet, because that is not always the answer for Crohn's disease or for other IBD diseases. And so again, it's like really just forcing myself to just, say, you have to take control, you have to advocate for yourself, you have to do the research as well, and be ready every time you get within the office with that doc. And because at the end of the day, they want you in and out, and you can't allow that.
Yeah, I love all those answers. I'm going to try and squeeze in another question. I know we're definitely firing them off, but I think this one ties in nicely because we talked about how important that support system is, and it can really help you stay stable in your identity, like we were just talking about, or redefine your identity. So do you guys have any tips on building a support system for those who might not have one? And anyone can hop in again.
I mean, I'm going to assume that we're talking beyond family here, because we're talking about people who probably either don't have or have a very small family to be able to turn to. And, when you do that, then it's about what friends you have. And then you go, okay, so what friends do I have that are tight, that I have a trust relationship with and can trust in? And then obviously online communities are another way. And it feels weird doing that. I'm not going to lie. That initial kind of step into the online is a huge jungle, and you feel like you're yelling to the void. But I will say this, people answer often, and people answer in kind and in ways you would have no idea otherwise with. It is amazing the support you will find in online communities that does and can translate to physical spaces.
I believe I pretty much everything that Rick just said. If you don't actually put yourself out there in a soft way that you're looking for help, it's unfortunately it's not really going to just come at your doorstep. Sometimes you just have to involve yourself with these organizations and listen, chime in here and there. You don't have to give full disclosure on your very first said, but then yet you can at least communicate with people because you definitely are going to hear someone's story that's so similar to yours. You may even sneak them a message to where, hey, I've gone through the same thing. Can we talk on a different level? And then that might start a whole new thing. But putting yourself out there, like I said, in a soft way is just a way to get started.
The only thing I will add is when you don't see something out there to represent yourself and your particular health issue, then create it. And that sounds like a very vulnerable thing to do, but put yourself out there, just like the Rick and Emmitt both said, but put yourself out there, be vulnerable and create it. If you don't see yourself, your ailment represented, do it and make that representation happen.
I feel like that's how we have to end this. It's just like mic drop, boom, done. Right at it's 8 p.m. Eastern time. So thank you all for a very insightful, and I know this is an overused term, but it really was inspiring to even me to hear your stories, because I learned a lot, and it goes back to the education piece, right? When you educate yourself, educate others, you guys are educating myself and probably many others who have learned about a lot of insightful tips, tricks, resources, and just kind of how to live your life as a man, and how can you open up about your health and your experiences. So I just want to say thank you all again for just taking the time to be here. And for those that listened in, thank you for being here as well. And I hope everyone has a good rest of their week and stay safe out there.